tragedy is this: you begin your life a newborn child, free, independent, free, abandoned. Children are not interested in all these external stimulation. They can just stimulate themselves on their own. They're excited by crawling around on a floor and just exploring walls even. And then they enter into this world, as we said, I think I mentioned a few weeks ago. You're born an original, and then you become a copy. You're born an original, and you start becoming a copy. You start copying your parents, your society, your friends. Oh, this is the standard. This is what society has to offer. And again, I'm not at all discussing suggesting that we don't have many blessings today. We have great blessings. Information, the access, these are great blessings. But they're great blessings if they're not. If you control them and they don't control you. If they're not great, imagine you have a tool chest with 3 tools in it. Okay, how bad can it get? But what happens if your tool chest has 3 million tools in it, and you don't even know what you're supposed to be building? What do you think is going to end up happening? You're going to become a victim, a product of your tool chest, like the hammer telling you what to do instead of you telling the hammer what to do. Now, I know it sounds so simple, so why can't we just fix it and just turn it around? Because it's infiltrated. It's corrupted us. We're jaded. We're no longer just these objective little creatures looking at the world and saying, okay, what's on the menu? Let me choose. We're already now part of the problem. It's very hard to become part of the solution. We're overstimulated and over-inundated, flooded by it all. Once you're in the flood, what could you do? Once you're in a boat that's going down, very difficult to say, oh, you know what? I should figure out what to do. Once a storm strikes, it's very difficult to address it. So we're given a chapter that tells us to pause. And then we're immediately told what happens if you don't do that. If you don't do that, a flood will take over. It may not be a flood of water where it just floods your whole house and so on. It may be a psychological flood. But what it's going to do is going to basically take over your mind, your heart, and you will not know what to do next. Now, there's good news at the end of the story, so don't think I'm just going to share the bad news. So, but you need to know, it's like have the cure of a problem is awareness. We need to know what the problem is. So each of you have to fill in the blanks yourself on your life. Each of us are flooded in different ways. And it's very difficult, trust me, it's very difficult. Once you're addicted to what floods you, it's not just so simple, say, you know what, okay, I'm dropping it all. We have to find our own in our own lives, what is flooding us? What is a priority? What isn't? I mentioned the analogy of the teacher who was giving a time management course. So the students, he wants to make a demonstration. He brings in an empty aquarium into the classroom, puts it on the side, has a few sacks. He starts filling up the aquarium with these large boulders. Okay, to the top of the aquarium, done. Class, is this aquarium full? No, it's not full. Yeah, he opens up bag number 2. Bag number 2 has small pebbles, and he pours it into the aquarium. So now, anyway, the big boulders obviously have plenty of crevices and this. The pebbles fills it up to the top. Is it full now? Some of the class say yes, some say no. Bag number 3. He opens a bag number 3, and this is very fine gravel. So fine gravel fills in all the cracks that are still that the pebbles didn't cover. Now is the gravel is spilling out from the top. Now is the aquarium full? He asks. So the smart Alex saw another sack, so they realized it's probably not. We don't know why, but it's not. Others said yes. Yes, he opens up sack number 4, and he has in it pitchers of water. He spills water into the aquarium. So now we got here the boulders, the small rocks, the gravel, and now the water spilling over the top. What else can you put in here? He didn't have another bag. I mean, if he was a physicist, maybe he could have brought subatomic particles, but I don't know how whether you can demonstrate that exactly. Fine. Is it full now? What do we learn from this? So remember, it's a time management class. So the smart ones say we learn very simple, that even when you think your calendar is full, you still can fit something else in. It's like these, today they have closet scientists. They know how to take your closet and maximize space in new ways. So even if you think the boulders are there and there's always room to put more things in. That was what the initial lesson seems to be. A time management course The instructor says, no, that's not the lesson. The lesson is, if you don't get the boulders in first, you're never going to get them in. If you don't have your priorities in place, and you put the water first, or the gravel, or the small stones, then you never get the boulders in. There won't be room. It says our lives are consumed with details. The details, the means. We eat, we sleep, we shop, we commute, and all the other stuff. Then you have to commute, It's like you need insurance, and you need insurance to cover your insurance, type of thing. So we have a whole series of activities that consume our lives. A very simple exercise, if you really want to get depressed. List everything you did today, from the morning till night. Everything, every detail. I tried this. You're going to come up with around 100, 150 items. And you tell me how many of them are boulders and how many of them are pebbles. Or I would say even more than pebbles. Insignificant matters, but you have to do them, or you thought you had to do them. Our life is controlled by the details. Because of survival, and because most of us were not given a strong, let's call it unwavering moral compass, that every second, every decision you make is defined by your compass. Most of us don't think that way. Business people do think that way in their business context, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's their life. It just means they've given their lives away to their business. So from business context, they think, the next 5 minutes, is it going to help my business? I spend my time. If it doesn't help my business, I'm not there. They're ruthlessly focused in that way. But the focus there is also on the means, because what's the business? The business is not your life. The business is what you do. Like most people, you ask them who you are, who are you? They give you their business card. But your business card is what you do, not who you are. If we knew who we were, and understood it well, every step of your life would be one question. Does that help actualize who I am? Does it help fulfill the mission of why I'm here? Or does it not? That would define everything. But how many people can you say have that type of clarity, have that type of single focus? Many people don't even know. I mentioned to people, just like a business can't function without a mission statement, you as a person can't function without a personal mission statement. People hear that and they say, it's an interesting thought. You're right. How could I function? I'll tell you why, because you're not accountable. In business, the business will fall apart if it doesn't have a mission statement. In our own personal lives, you don't have to answer it to anyone, so you can get away with it. And then, of course, some people will say, I didn't even know that I have a mission, let alone what the mission is. And for many, it's a revelation to know, that it's true. If I believe in some way of design that my soul was sent to this world, there's some purpose to my life, then what is the purpose? The big question. Everybody say, why am I here? Why are we here? The biggest question. But it's not just a theoretical question. It defines everything. If you know why you're here, all the details follow from there. That's what I mean, who's in control. And that's what happens. When a person is driven by self-interest alone, it's complete chaos. It may not be chaos today, but it will become. Because self-interest is a very mercurial, temporary, moody thing. Now you're interested in this, now I'm interested in that. Oh, that's a nice idea. Let's change channels. There's nothing to go by. There's no higher order. There's no game plan. There's no coordinates. And that's what happens. That's what the Torah tells us. You will self-destruct, personally, and destroy everything around you, and be flooded if there is no compass at all. Simple as that. Just like a ship without an anchor, without a rudder, without a compass, what's going to happen? It's going to go in circles. It will get lost. What we call a lost soul. So you may wonder, so what's the good news? The good news is, first of all, no one's born a lost soul. Just like when you suddenly find yourself lost deep in the woods, ask yourself, at what step did you get lost? That's not a ridiculous question. No one gets lost in one step. You're right. You're going on a road. You veer off accidentally a drop. You keep going. Every day you go deeper and deeper, and then at some point, I don't know how to get back. There's no such thing as somebody just suddenly is lost. Everything can be traced. Everything begins somewhere. It usually begins with a very small little thing. I remember traveling once to Minnesota. It was northern Minnesota. So a guy, it was there, a local. So I want to show you something interesting. He takes me to the Minnesota-Canadian border. right north up. And we come to, and we stop at the road. He takes me out. We go down to a little ravine, like this, a little brook of water, very thin, a flow of water, literally thin. And he says, "Let me show you something." He takes a few rocks and puts it down, and stops the water from flowing. No big thing. It was literally a trickle, like a trickle from a faucet. And that was that. So I said, okay. And then he says, if I leave these rocks here, if I build even a bigger dam, within a number of years, the Mississippi River will dry up. This little trickle is the place where the water ultimately originates, and ultimately will become the Mississippi River. If you know, the Mississippi River is a pretty mighty river. And it was fascinating to see. We see things that are big. We don't see where they are at their root. At the root, many things are just a one small little move. Little thing here, let it exponentially move on and grow, and suddenly it becomes a monster. For good or for bad. Something good, a good habit, a little move, you make one shift. Look how many stories you often hear. Someone say, what changed in your life? And they tell you a little thing that happened that you would think was completely insignificant. That changed the whole course of a person's life. And that could also go the other way. So we don't begin just lost. Everything starts step, 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 step. Can you retrace the steps? It's harder as we get older, because there's so many steps where now we are lost. But the point that I'm saying is, just like we didn't begin that way, we don't have to end that way. So what's the solution? So you have a second half of the chapter that talks about the flood, but it also talks about the refuge. Noah and his children, his family, build an ark. The ark protects them from the floods. What is the significance of that? So if you know some Hebrew, you'll know the word teva, in Hebrew, boat or ship. There are at least three words for a ship. One is aniyah, is a boat, is a ship. You have sfina, is in Aramaic, but it's also used, sfina. And you have teva, an ark. But the word teva is actually the one that's most usually not used for a ship or boat. You don't use the word teva. Teva also means a box. But another word teva means a word. In Hebrew, the word, W-O-R-D, a word is a teva. Os is a letter. Several letters make a teva. As I mentioned before, in Hebrew, words have many meanings. Shvi, 7, means satiated. So the Baal Shem Tov says something fascinating, that when God tells Noah, says, the flood is coming, build for yourself, aseh lecha teva, build for yourself an ark, saying build for yourself words. When there's a flood of knowledge, information, any type of flood, anything that inundates our lives and takes control, the only way to get control, to regain control, is to do something. You cannot be overwhelmed by a flood and say, okay, now I'm going to protect myself. How? The flood is more powerful than you. She says, build words. He says, these are the words of prayer and the words of Torah. Sacred words. And surround yourself with them, and they will become your ark. They'll become your refuge. They'll allow you to float and make it through the flood. Which means, in simple English, let me tell you a little story that captures this. You hear today some of them. I don't know if you remember last year in City Field, with this like 90,000 Orthodox Jews got together to bemoan the internet. Today they say the whole thing was just to sell a few filters, but who knows what. But anyway, that's what they did. I know many people who went there, and they told me they were very disappointed. They came, they heard everybody, fire and brimstone against the internet, and how it's an intrusion and an invasion, and the alien forces are taking over, etc. But no one made any suggestions, besides, as I said, some filters. The problem with the internet is not for children. It's the people that need the filters most are the ones that are creating the filters and making the filters. Like I remember when we got a computer, my daughter asked me, do you want to put any parental controls? She was putting parental controls for me, you understand, because she knows how to run them. I didn't know how to run the computer. So it's the adults that need the filter. Children, leave them alone. The point I want to make is that it was very disappointing for many. So someone asked me, what would you suggest? I said, look, the internet and technology is a gift, an opportunity in many ways. However, like the flood, like water. Anyone that owns a home knows that water is a blessing, but it's also water could be the greatest curse. If you don't cook, you don't have the proper what's the word? Not just plumbing. The water, like the rain pipes, the drains. If you don't have the proper drains, water suddenly seeps in. It can destroy your whole house from the foundation. Somebody had to, who knows, the whole foundation deteriorated because there was a leak from their shower. And for many, like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. The water starts seeping. Remember, water goes wherever it is allowed to go. So there's a crack, water enters, then it freezes, and blah, 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 and it can create major damage. Terrible damage. Just like fire. We all know fire. Without warmth of the fire, we have no life. But fire out of control, what happens? It's exactly the same thing. It's a flood. A flood doesn't mean that the object is bad. It means if it's untempered and uncontrolled, and there's no proper drainage and no proper filtering, that's where it becomes a disaster. So there's a simple lesson to the internet. Like I was talking this evening, all about what information overload. So there's one story that happened, I remember, with me that really captures the essence of it all. How you build an ark. I was driving to East Hampton for a Shabbaton a number of years ago. It's at least 10 years ago, maybe more, 12, 15 years ago probably. I stopped to get some gas at some hick town there, over the highway, Long Island Expressway. And I'm filling the car with gas. A guy, right near the gas station was a club. And they were preparing for their Friday night, whatever, show, party. So the guy who's doing the parking attendant comes over to me and says to me if I'm staying for the show, he'll park my car. So I said, no, I'm going to another show farther down, And we start talking. He was very intrigued to what about with me. I don't know why. And he says to me, what do I do? So I said, I write, I teach. What do you write about? Spirituality, psychology. He says, do you have an email address? I told him, he said, that I send out a weekly email thought. He says, send it to me. He gives me his email address. I mark it down. I didn't forget the story, but I came back. I gave it to my office, and they put him on the list, and he started getting the emails. I forgot about it. I had no reason to address it. Around 5 years later, literally 5 years later, I get an email from him one day. He says, you probably don't remember me. I was this parking attendant. Now I've graduated. He's already in some other business. And I was there, and we talked, and I gave you my email address. You probably also don't know that I'm Jewish. And I actually lost my parents in a car accident when I was a child, and I've been scraping around trying to make a life for myself. I have no relationship at all with my Judaism, no schooling, no synagogue, nothing. I live really among non-Jews mostly in my life. But your emails have become my faith. It says, I pray with them, I celebrate with them, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. He writes in the email about everything. He says, your email is when I get the email Thursday night. Friday night I use it as a prayer. He says, I just want you to know the lifeline that you've created for me. This is my Jewish life. I was very overwhelmed actually, and moved by that. But what was it? It was an email. It was just on the list. I didn't even intentionally send it to him. It was just to press a button, and there he gets an email. Had there been no email, I met the guy. Would he have come to New York to my class? Unlikely. Would I ever see him again? Never, probably. So I saw right there the magic of the internet in the positive way. When it's harnessed. So very simply put, that's exactly what the Baal Shem Tov says. God says to Noah, there's a flood of information or a flood of whatever flood. Build an ark. Build words. Build words. Use the words properly. And not only will it not protect you from the flood, it'll actually harness all that information toward a positive purpose. So I made it my mission after that story. I actually wrote to him that wherever I go, I became an obsessive collector of emails. I just collect. I don't, not unsolicited, but every people I meet, I said, yeah, you have an email? Great, I'll send you my email. People ask me often, what can I do a good deed? I said, a very simple thing. Send a nice thought, a warm thought to somebody by email. It doesn't cost you anything. It's a press of a button, literally almost effortless. You get something, pass it on. Today, you don't need to go to somebody's home. You don't need to send it in the mail. You don't need stamps. You don't need anything. A simple thing. And you turn a tool that can overwhelm you into a force for good. Imagine if everybody used technology in this fashion. Not all the time, even part of the time. We'd have a different world today. Literally. So to me, I look at it that way. Now I see, every time I write something, I think, hey, potentially 7 billion people may read this. I'm not saying this arrogantly or because conceptually, that's the truth. And that's how we have to think. So you can suddenly take a tool that has become really an indulgence, frankly. Most people tell you, technology is either play games, you socialize, or some other self-interest. And turn it into a force of good. It becomes, that same flood becomes a flood of goodness. Because it's not just overwhelming, it's harnessed. It's directed by something. So God says to Noah, build an ark. Build yourself an ark. Build yourself words. You pray every morning. You study Torah. You fill your mind with holy and sacred words and ideas. You will be protected from the whole deluge. And not only protected, you'll know how to use it for good. And if you don't have that, you don't have a compass. It would be like literally being out there in the floodwaters and you have no boat to ride on. You have no teva, you have no words, you have nothing to hold on to, no life raft. It's not even a complicated message if you think about it, but it's right there. As I said, strip the story of all the geographic and technical details. It's the story of our lives. Simple as that. What happens, how people destroy themselves, and anarchy, a flood, when there's no direction, and with direction, how one can preserve themselves and rebuild a new world, which is what Noah does. And interesting, the Torah also says it wasn't just him; he brought all the animals, the species. So he saved the world. You say, why are the animals responsible? The animals didn't do anything wrong. It's true, but it's interesting. Corrupt people create corrupt animals. And this is not a joke, but you see in New York, you'll see animal hospitals, and I don't know if you know this, but there are also animal therapists today. So the couple I know, they have 4 dogs, and one dog was acting up, so they took him to the therapist. It's not a joke. And the therapist called him in and said, the animal is all fine, checks out, but I think you guys are having a lot of strife in your house, and it's just creating the animal's getting neurotic because you're neurotic. So you guys got to calm down, I told them, why don't you have some children, and that may calm it down. They say then we'll corrupt the children. So animals can get corrupt by us, which is actually a statement in this chapter that because human beings can influence the environment, so screwed up human beings screw up the animal kingdom, which on their own would be fine. So you show me there's no such thing as a neurotic animal on its own. No animals need therapists. No animals have anxiety. Are not missing anything. They don't need the internet, that's for sure. And they don't need all the different medications to calm them down or relax them. I'd like you to find a depressed monkey. They get depressed when humans do things with them. That's when they get depressed. Now, I'm not saying that because there's anomalies. I'm sure there can be there's mutations and stuff like that. But I'm talking about generally speaking. The only animals that were not corrupt during the flood were, who? The fish. Because the fish are underwater. And human beings can't affect them. The fish don't hear our arguments on earth. It would be an interesting study. Even goldfish or other fish people have, let's say at home, can fish. Yeah, but they're in the water, so they don't really hear what's going on around them. That would be the theory. So the fish didn't have any problems. They never got corrupt. They was not subject. As a matter of fact, a flood doesn't bother fish. What do they care? They live underwater anyway. So that's an interesting lesson. I want to say one more thing. Water is also in Judaism always a symbol of knowledge. Me'adas atar, the word is the pure waters of knowledge. And Isaiah, in his famous prophecy that we say Pesach, Passover, he says there will be no more destruction in the world because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Kimala aretz deis Hashem kamayim layam achasim. So interesting. Mala Aretz Deis Hashem is a verse. This chapter says Mala Aretz Chomas. The world was filled with crime, with violence. Same words. Word filled with violence, word filled with knowledge, divine knowledge. As the waters cover the sea. So the waters covering the sea is not a bad thing per se, when it's knowledge that is divine, and it's knowledge that you are controlling, not it's controlling you. So there's a lot to think about when you read a chapter like this, and it comes at the best time right after the high holiday season. Because now we're entering a space where what are you going to do? You don't have the holidays to protect you, to lift you. You're on your own. What are you going to do with the world around you? Will it flood you? Or will you build refuge? Will you build a teva? So the lessons of this chapter come right after we finish Bereshis, right after we finish Simchas Torah. When we finish the holidays, we enter a new world, and Noach depicts the real world, the real harsh world that can go two ways. And of course, the end of the story is a good ending because Noach does build an ark, and they are preserved, and they have children and grandchildren. And who's born as a result 10 generations later? The end of this chapter, Abraham, who begins to bring light into the world. And Abraham, in next week's chapter, goes on the journey, Lech Lecha, the journey to engage life, to transform a selfish world into a selfless world, which we shall discuss, obviously, in the next class. So you have in this chapter really a microcosm, or you could say it reflects, mirrors our lives. And the lessons, I gave several lessons, but hopefully you can use this to and develop further lessons. There's many things that can be derived and learned from this chapter. It's a tremendous lesson it's so uncanny because it's literally what we're going through, a flood. I remember reading William Safire, the journalist, the writer in the New York Times, passed away a few years ago. So he wrote something very interesting years ago, at least 95, 96, talking about 20 years ago, which was the advent of email, if you remember. The websites were just being born in 95, 96. Then we had the three options, AOL, Prodigy, and what was the third one? CompuServe, maybe, yeah? Those, I think, were the three ones. No one's old enough to remember, only me. I'm sad. Those are the three. And I think everyone said America Online is not going to make it. Prodigy was very popular. And the thing was CompuServe. I think that was the third one. Nobody remembers? Anyway, AOL made it, obviously. The others you don't even know about. Huh? No. Hotmail came afterwards. AOL was before.
Yahoo?
No. It wasn't Yahoo. It was the three email providers. Those were the websites. They weren't. They started as websites that became then email. Now Google didn't exist even. Google was just the mathematical term for. But why am I saying it? Because William Safire wrote a very interesting article then. I remember it stayed with me. He said that once the whole power of journalists and writers throughout history has been their ability to get the scoop, to find the story, the angle, to have the connection. That was what journalists were all about. The ones that had the connections, they could make a phone call and find out what happened. They had that credibility. So it was that they had exclusive information, basically. It says we're entering a world where it's going to become exact opposite. Information is going to be available to all. Exclusive, that type of corporate secret information is not going to exist. So what will be the role of journalists in the future? So interestingly, he posed it, he said, we will be information traffic police. We will have to do the exact opposite. Instead of us telling you a piece of information, we'll tell you what information you shouldn't look at, filter through it, and give you what is relevant, because there's going to be so much of it that the real important information will be lost in the shuffle. I thought it was a very fascinating insight, and he's absolutely right. Today, who's an authority? Someone that can tell you, if you Google and get 1,000 results, tell you these 2-3 results are the key ones you need to. As a matter of fact, Google's success is actually because they uncannily deliver responses to most people. 95% of people who Google get more or less what they're looking for. That's why it's not uncanny. It's algorithms and sciences and whatever they're doing, they're right. But the point is, today the opposite. It's not about finding that, hidden piece of truth. It's there. The problem is it's completely, it's like diamonds in the rough. Go discover it when you have, it's buried in there. And interesting, I just was reading as well, a few years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, they all put their curriculums up for free online. You can get everything that they teach in their universities. And everyone said, what kind of, I mean, those curriculums are worth, they're charging hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition to go study in those universities. And if you study why they're doing it, their answer is because the real power of these universities is not their information, is their networking. You go to Harvard, a class, 80% of your class are going to be CEOs or leaders. So it's more the connections, it's not the knowledge. And today they have no problem putting up knowledge for free. I guess also you have to have knowledge to know how to read knowledge. That's another story. But still, that's not considered anymore that type of content. It's not considered that same type of exclusivity that it once had does not exist anymore. I'm not saying there aren't corporate secrets and Coca-Cola's formula is still a secret, etc. But that's another story. I'm talking about real information, knowledge. Let's say you want to study physics, you want to study this. It's all available. But today you need someone to direct and say what is important to read and what's not that important to read. So, reading this chapter is really, to me, a prescient insight into our lives today. The floods, the information, the filtering, the refuge, the finding the words that matter. I began around 2 years ago teaching every morning a class in Ayin Beis. Ayin Beis is short for Ayin Beis is 72 for the year 5672. A little more than 100 years ago, when the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, began this magnum opus, this Mount Everest of mysticism, a discourse. It's very dense and complicated. I teach it every morning that I'm able to. Just resumed yesterday morning after the holidays. And I have to tell you, it's changed me in many ways. Even though I've studied my whole life, and I've studied these texts, and this is what I work, this is my life. But studying it every day and having to struggle and break my head like I did when I was a student in yeshiva, who knows how many years ago, 30 years ago, besides that it gives you, it makes you young again, it opens up channels of creativity, gives you courage, and above all, it gives you that refuge that I'm describing here. You're not controlled by other forces. You're in control. You're studying something, it lifts you to another place. So I would highly recommend to anyone here to find something, some text, some book, something, but I'm not talking about just for your pleasure. Something that challenges you and lifts you to another place. Just like music, transports you to another place. This is the best way to build a refuge around all the things that inundate us. And I mean everything. I don't just mean the media and advertising I mentioned before and our own fears. I mean all the forces, because then you take control. You are deciding, I'm going to be studying something, I'm going to conquer this text or this book or this information. Something that challenges you. You'll be amazed of how much it both protects and harnesses everything else, because it starts creating focus. These are the things we should be looking for. So instead of becoming a victim of circumstances or a victim of the details of our lives, you start directing your life. And that can only come when you find spiritual and, I would say, timeless values that you commit to. That should be what excites us. If not, if you get excited by people stimulating you, you are on the receiving end. You have to be on the giving end. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to a simple formula. You're being influenced or you're influencing. And you can't do both. If you're not influencing others, you're being influenced. That's how it is. Or as some say, if you're not busy being born, you're busy dying. You're either initiating or you are receiving. Now, of course, we all need to receive and to give and balance it all. But I mean that to have something that we are in control of, something that we are influencing others. Because that's how it is. We're social animals, we're social creatures, we're affected by the world around us. Like that perpetual poem that never ends, that goes like this. I don't know if I made it up or I saw it somewhere, I don't even remember now, where it says, I'm watching people watch people, watch people, watch people, watch people. You can go on and on and on, as many lines as you like. You can spend the rest of your life just doing that, watching people, watch people, watch people, watch people. They're watching you and you're watching them. And it's a nice vicious cycle of everybody watching each other and nobody's initiating. The blind leading the blind, in the words of the holy Shakespeare. The joke with the Jew who translated Shakespeare into Yiddish. So he writes, verbessert durch Yankel Todders. Which means translated and improved by Yankel Todders. Improved is the key word. So a Jew doesn't just translate Shakespeare, he improves it. That's verbessert. So, you know Yiddish? Okay, good. So there you go. So my friends, we enter a new year. There's a flood, but you have a place of refuge. It's your choice. And my suggestion is to take the words of the Baal Shem Tov as he explains it, and build yourself words, sacred words, prayer, words of prayer, words of Torah. These are the things that lift you up. And then the water, what happens on a boat when there's a flood? The flood just keeps lifting the boat up. And so not only are you not being this, it's actually the flood becomes a force that makes you grow. And that's how I see it. So using technology, using Facebook, using email, but sending a message. For every email you send that's just a leisurely or meaningless email, send an email that has some meaning to somebody, nice, kind words to somebody, anything like that. So you'd be shocked what kind of impact that can have. And then suddenly it's passed on. They call it viral. So viruses were always known to be negative. Virus is like spreading disease. But virus can also be positive. It becomes a viral, perpetual impact of positivity. So I want to bless everybody as we come to the holiday season, and we're at literally the bridge between Tishrei and Cheshvan. That we should take this saturated month of all these rich holidays, and above all, infuse it into the new year. It should be a healthy year, materially and spiritually, a success for everyone and everything that you need. Success in parnasa and livelihood, in finding the right love, and the right relationships, healthy, enduring relationships. I emphasize the word enduring because finding is one thing, maintaining is the harder part. Maintenance contracts are always more expensive than the original contract. That's where they get you, the maintenance. So I'm saying in a positive sense, and should be a blessed year in every possible way, and hopefully we do our little part of being part of the solution, as opposed to being part of the problem, will ultimately tip the scale, and we will finally come to a point where the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, tomorrow night Philip will be giving his weekly class. We will continue, now that the holiday is over, resuming every Wednesday night, both here and online. I wish everybody, wherever they are, a very beautiful week and year, as I said. And any way we can help you, again, since I mentioned email, I should mention it again. It's not just email today. You can do it through all kinds of different media developments. And hopefully this year I please God, will be unveiling a whole new website and a whole bunch of new programs that will help not just subside, but take control of this flood that's out there. So I thank you again for honoring me and listening to what I have to say, and the honor of sharing, intersecting the trajectories of our soul's journeys is a very sacred thing to me and hopefully to all of us. So everyone have a very good week. Thank you.